Welcome to my first ever sit-down interview. I'm really excited for this conversation that I had with Rebecca Lavrenz. She's known as the J6 Praying Grandma because on January 6th she entered the Capitol to exercise her First Amendment. She prayed, she broke no law, she did nothing wrong, she was no harm to anyone, but then she was wrongly persecuted, prosecuted, and charged by our very own Justice Department for her faith, for what she believed in, for which side she was on. I love her story though because it's very inspiring for each of us because she embodies what any average American can do no matter how young or how old. We can all exercise our First Amendment. We can all address our grievances to the government. And then we should all have the courage to stand up even in the face of adversity. So I hope you'll sit through this whole interview as Rebecca shares her testimony and she goes through what she learned from this experience and she shares her words of wisdom. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed talking to her. I find her as an amazing inspiration, and I hope you do as well. So, enjoy. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elijah Woody, and today we have a very special guest that I am super excited to talk to. She has an incredible story, an inspiring story. Rebecca Lavrenz, known as the J6 Praying Grandma. Rebecca, I want to just open up with your story. So you went to January 6th. If you could just kind of unpack, talk about why you went, what you did that day, and we'll go from there because you guys are really going to enjoy this. We're going to learn a lot. So dive right in.
Okay. Well, going back 4 or 5 years, I guess it is 5 years now.
Yeah.
My oldest son said, "Mom, have you thought about going to Stop the Steal rally?" I said, "Well, I haven't thought about it." And this was like January 1 of 2021. I said,
Wow.
"Well, I'll pray about it." Didn't take long after I prayed. He says, "I think you should pray about it." And he said, "I know you won't fly because they would never wear one of those face diapers."
Yeah.
So I decided, I'll pray about it. And he says, "Mom, it'll only take you 25 hours to drive there." And so I said, "I'll pray about it." Didn't take long. I spent some time with the Lord, and he says, "Rebecca, I want you to go on this trip, and we're going to have an adventure together." I have a very personal relationship with God, so I said, "Okay, God, I'll do it." And I felt led to fast and pray. I knew I was going there to pray. I kind of thought I'd follow a caravan of people that were coming in from Colorado. I drove. They were going too slow, and so I said, "I'll leave them in the dust." I'll just go because I wanted to get there. I had just one mission, and when I know God has called me to do something, I'm very focused. And I knew God had called me to go there. Got there on the night of the 5th. Next morning when I got up to go over there, I walked over to the Capitol. We're excited to be in there I just started taking some classes that fall on the election with Constitutional Live and Patriot Academy. So my dad was a government teacher, so I knew a lot. And so he taught me actually. But then when I took those Constitutional Live classes, I really knew that this is my duty. And we were all grieved, we the people.
Yes, with the election.
With election. And so I thought I have to exercise my First Amendment right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, right?
Amen.
So that's besides obeying God to go, and that foundation into me that I got to do my civic duty. I'm a citizen of heaven first, and then a citizen of the U.S. of the United States. And so I was just excited actually to be there. So that day when I got there, I knew that my call there was just to pray. I didn't know what, I wasn't there with any group or anything like that. I just went as a representative, as a citizen myself. And I just was praying. I got right behind whatever you want, the bike racks.
Yep.
And I felt like God had positioned me. I just knew something. I was there just to pray. And I said, "God, there's something in the spiritual realm that you have me there to pray." So I was right behind. Nobody was in front of me. I said, "I'm going to stay here till we get heard."
Right.
And whatever that meant. And then after a little bit, I decided I looked to the left of me, and there was a platform where people were worshiping and praying, and I thought, I'm just going to walk over there. I walked over there. Before I even hit the grassy area where they were worshiping and praying, all of a sudden the Spirit of God fell on me so strong, Elijah, I could not even stand up. I ended up falling to the ground, just sitting on the curb, and just started weeping and praying in the Spirit, and I knew that I was praying for something for our country, not knowing what it was.
So at this point, this is earlier in the morning, right? And you're right outside the Capitol.
12:30.
Okay, 12:30.
11:30. Excuse me.
Okay, and so you haven't gone in yet or anything,
no.
right?
I'll quickly go forward a little bit, but so I got that sense of praying, and it was just so heavy, and I just cried and cried. Knew I was praying for my country, but didn't know what. And after about 10 minutes, it lifted. And then I walked over, and I just felt so. What came out of that prayer time of 10 minutes was that I said, I've got to pray the 1620 Mayflower Covenant. And if you know what that is, it's like the Pilgrims when they came to our country in 1620.
Right, that's going back to the pillars,
original.
The original foundation of our country. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've always been one to go back to original foundations. Tell me the root thing, and then I'll go for it. You know,
right.
What did God intend? And that to me is the very beginning.
Original intent. Yes.
Original intent was, and that before they even stepped foot on this land, they signed this document, the Mayflower Compact, that said this land will be for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. And they signed it as a compact, and another word for compact, with agreement with God, is a covenant.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very strong in covenant.
Yes.
And I knew that that's what I was praying. So I just got up and said, can I use your mic and pray just with this? And I just said, that's all I prayed. Just that little phrase. Didn't pray anything else.
Yep.
No other words. Just that's what.
And
God
so that's
told me.
mostly what you saw at January 6th, right? Because a lot of people have a skewed view of, as insurrectionists, and there's so many people there that were intentful with harm. And what I think you saw there were a lot of other grandmothers like you, a lot of grandfathers, a lot of moms and fathers, and just Americans who were, like you said earlier, trying to exercise their First Amendment right.
Yeah, I had photos of people around there that they were joyful. They were just saying, we are happy to be an American.
Yes.
We're waving our flag. We're singing all kinds of patriot songs. This is our house. I had a very firm belief whatever I do around people very much, I wear this pin, that we the people, because I knew I was not there for me. I was there for God and for the people that were here. There to stand up for the foundations that we could see were crumbling. So I walked back. I was there about a half an hour. Walked back. It was about 12 o'clock, and I just was there listening to what was going on and everything. While I was there, about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, I just had this thought that kept coming to me. And how God speaks to you, and it says in a still small voice. And I felt like He was saying to me, Rebecca, if the doors open, will you carry my presence into the building?
And the doors weren't open at this point, right?
The barricades hadn't been mugged.
Wow, and so you're already getting this thought, right? That's beautiful.
Yeah, and the main thing I want to tell people, and everybody has their own reason why they went there. Yeah. I think the main reason was we wanted to stand for our rights, and I did. But even bigger than that for me, and I want to. When you get me, maybe we can talk a little bit about my sentencing, because that was the key thing.
Yes.
But I think what was so important to me was I didn't go there for me. I went there because God told me to go. I had no intention to go. But if God tells me something and I know it's God, I don't care what you do. You can shoot me.
Well, and I think we were able to kind of see that with, the persecution that you went through, and you stood strong, and you were an example for the nation, and you were definitely going to get to that. So I want to go back to the doors eventually open, right?
Yeah. So what happened was about 2 o'clock, there's a gentleman that had an amplifier, or whatever you call it now, an amplifier, was recording something, or was broadcasting something, the speech and all the kind of stuff. But it went around through all the crowd. We knew that Vice President Pence was going to certify everything. And of course I said, oh, you have to listen to us. Just give us another chance to look at the votes, And I thought with the process that had been established in our Constitution, we would do that. But, we never thought it would go as far as it did, right? But anyway, so I just said, okay, I kept, expressing my thoughts to God. Okay, God, if that's you, what do I do? That kind of thing. And finally, I just said, okay, I'm going to believe that I heard you right. Whatever, I didn't have anything. I thought it's all right. We're the people. The
people's house, right?
Yeah, people's house. That's what we were saying all the way.
Yeah.
A lot of people were chanting that. And then I thought, well, you know what? These people that we elected, they represent us. They need to hear us. That's what the First Amendment says. A redress of petition the government. We've already done all this other stuff, and you still won't. Make sure we went through the nice process. We're not going to overthrow the government. Nobody there, I don't think, had an arm on them, firearm on them. I know I didn't. And so many people I knew that did carry firearms in Colorado, they didn't carry them there.
Right.
Because they knew in the you couldn't do that. Well, anyway, so then about 2:15 something, the 2:30, the barriers came down. And remember I said when I first got there, I got there right in front. Well, I went to pray, came back, and I got the same place back.
Oh, wow.
So I said, okay, God, that's a good.
So you decide to enter.
The barriers came down, and I said, okay, I'm going. So I walked through I was one of the first, 50 people probably that went through the barriers. I'm on the east side, not on the west side where a lot of the commotion was going on, more of the, things that were more violent and stuff like that. But then when I got up to the top, I went to this little platform in the side, and then I was just we were very crowded and packed in, and then we were just standing there because the doors weren't open. And then all of a sudden, and there's so many people, and I'm not a tall person, I'm not real short, but I didn't see what happened. But I know with a government building like that, they're not just going to be able to push them in.
Oh, right, of course,
We all know that. But then I said, oh, they're opened because people were moving forward. So okay, my chance to obey God. So I walked in, was in the rotunda, just stayed in the ropes.
Yeah.
I said hi to a greeter at the door. One of the police officers just kind of letting us in, and just kind of on the video coverage footage that was at my trial, you can see I was just being friendly, or they looked like they were being friendly. Got in the rotunda. While I was in there, I was at this Kairos moment. It was just like I knew that I knew that I knew that I was exactly where God wanted me to be. Because the first thing that came to me, and I don't always think intellectually about things, I usually go intuitively.
Right.
But the thing that came to me was, this country will not go down to the ideologies of socialism and Marxism, not on my watch. That came to me, and all I could do, I saw my 3 youngest grandchildren. They were 7, 5, and 3 at the time. And I said, this is for them. And I just was like, felt so powerful. I don't know what you would call it, but it was just a very powerful experience.
A very surreal moment that you can just feel.
I'll never forget that. It was just like, I am right where I'm supposed to be. I'm older, obviously. I'm 73 now, but when I was 68 or 69, I don't know, something like that. You can do the calculations, but I don't remember. But I remember thinking, I cannot do what other people can do at this age, but I can at least stand up for my country and obey God.
Wow, and I like that a lot, because anyone can stand up for their country, stand up for their family, their home, the values that we hold true at any age. You could be young, you could be older, you could really be in any situation in life, but we all have a voice, and we all have opinions, and I think it's really important to make those opinions heard.
Yeah.
And so going back, so you're in the Capitol, you're unarmed. You have no ill will. You're just walking around.
Being obedient in there.
Right. You didn't really go into any places you weren't supposed to.
I didn't say one word. Nobody pushed me, shoved me. I was in there and
praying silently, right?
Okay. I got to say that people think I went in there and I actually prayed something, but I was just communing with the Father, I suppose.
Okay.
Because I believe as a believer in Jesus, He lives in me, so whenever He said carry my presence in there, it wasn't like I had to say something necessarily.
Right.
So take it as you like, but there was communion with God.
Yeah. So you enter the Capitol peacefully, unarmed. You enter, you do nothing wrong. No laws broken, nothing. And then our very own Justice Department, our very own country, very own government comes after you.
Just walked in, walked out.
Yes, and then they persecute you.
Yes.
Political persecution.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
That's, to me, very, very sad, and it's important, that we get your story out, and it definitely was proclaimed, throughout the country. So, what exactly was that persecution like? Can you go through? So you had 4 misdemeanor.
4 federal misdemeanors.
4 federal misdemeanors. Okay.
Yeah, and they had investigated me actually around Patriots Day, for April 19th.
Did they really?
Yeah, it was.
Oh my
Patriots
goodness.
Day. Yeah, so around that. Actually, and then that's another little story, but I don't want to get to that.
Okay.
It probably take too long. But well, let's just say it's a kind of funny story. They came to my door. We've heard a lot of stories about January 6th, all the SWAT teams and all that. Well, it was April 19th or around that. My oldest son's birthday, the one that invited me to go to the camp, it said it was his birthday that day. He was born on Patriots Day. Okay. And so I was going to have he and his family over for dinner. I was baking a cake, and I get a knock on the door. I live out on 5 acres. In the country in Colorado, and I heard a knock on the door. I go to the door. There's a man and a woman out there, and I thought, "Oh, what do you guys want here?" I usually don't get guests just at my door. And they presented a card to me, and they said we're with the FBI.
So that's when all of this started.
That's when it started, because I thought, well, they're not. I knew everything was going with other people, but I thought because I was there by myself, just exercising my right. I'm not on social media.
So what year was this? Was this 2021?
Yeah,
okay, so
April 21.
Okay, so just later that spring, you get the knock on the door on April 19th. So for those of you who don't know, that is the day back in 1775 that the Revolutionary War began up in Lexington and Concord with that infamous shot heard around the world. Yeah. So that's the day they decide to target you.
And I think, just for so you know what their agenda, they try, I think they, with everything they did on the day that they chose to finally arrest me, you know, a year and a half later, or 2.5 years later, was right before Christmas, because they kind of do that.
Right.
And because I don't celebrate.
Well, they're trying to demoralize you. Yeah.
Yeah,
they're trying to break your spirit. But you have the Spirit of God, and you can't be broken,
right? Yeah, it's like
right?
you can't be broken once you do that. And so when they came to my door, I don't know if you heard this, but came to my door and they said that. I said, I'm really sorry, but could you please come back another day? My kitchen is such a mess. and so they said, okay, sure, just give us a call. And so they gave me the card.
Interesting.
So anyway.
Wow.
So anyway, that's part of my story, which is kind of funny, because I know it's funny for me, just because I just knew God's presence. Because I remember telling my kids after that I did, and I said, you did what? You told the FBI that they can't come in because your house is a mess? And I said, yeah, I guess it just was God coming out of me.
That's very
It's like
funny.
God prepares you for what you have to do.
Right.
If you're following Him and wanting to obey Him. And so then, fast forward, they did investigate me. They didn't get back to me for about 4 months and said they're probably going to be charged with 4 federal misdemeanors. You have to go up to the courthouse in Denver and be charged and arrested and, you know, that kind of thing. So they had it all planned.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going through this, and I want to speak about, you know, the trial period. Before we get to that, so 4 misdemeanors. Ultimately, you go before a judge. Can you explain kind of the judge that you went before, and then what happened after that? I believe you were in 6 months of house arrest, right?
Right.
And then he barred you from the internet access, right? Because your voice, God gave you a voice on social media, right? You were really inspiring patriotism and inspiring people to speak up. And then they said, oh no, we're going to take your internet access away. So that's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Okay. So my trial was in April. It began March 25th of 2024. 2024.
So this is 3 years later.
Yeah, I got arrested in the fall or December of 2022. Okay. That's when I was charged, or that's when my charges were given me. I spent 3 hours in a prison cell while they waited to, take me up to read the charges to me. And then a whole year and a half later is when my trial was. And I wanted a jury trial because I knew God had said to me, don't take a plea. It's not of me. God sometimes speaks to me in rhymes, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to do that. The first attorney I had said, I think you should take a plea because they're just so corrupt in there. Even though he was for what we were doing, he just said they're so corrupt, they don't treat women or older women in these prisons very well, and he wanted to protect me. And I just told him, I said, I just can't do that. I can't disobey God. And he said, well, I'll still defend you. But he said, whatever you want to do, if you want to get a different attorney, you can. But then when I did, I finally thought, I just can't do that with somebody that's not going to have the same courage and stuff that I do to stand up for myself, to stand up for what I believe in. And then I said, I'm sorry, but I'll have to find another attorney. He said, oh, that's totally fine, he says. And then he said to me, and I'm saying this because he said, Rebecca, you're a breath of fresh air. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he says, because you stand for principle. And I just want to encourage people, if you're listening to this, what you do in critical moments like that really matter. I don't know why I'm getting emotional about this, but somebody needs to hear this, because, sometimes we look at it, oh, what are they going to do to me? And that's the problem that you just said. People want to intimidate you so you don't stand up for those freedoms. And early on, when I became a Christian, when I was in my teens, I remember thinking to myself, when I finally accepted Jesus into my heart, I knew that my life wasn't my own. That doesn't mean I did everything right and followed him in obedience and everything, but I knew that my life was like, I'm a coin in your pocket whenever we used to use coins. Jesus, use me wherever you want to use me. And that's what I looked at my life. Kind of like Nathan Hale. And he's my favorite.
I only regret that I have but one life to give for my country.
Yeah, he's my hero. But anyway, that's how I lived. And, people in the Bible like Paul and Daniel, they didn't care. Daniel went and prayed the way he always did in front of an open window. Because he ended up getting thrown in the lion's den, and God shut their mouths.
But God protected him because he was obedient.
And that's what I look at as how God got treated in this whole thing. God was protecting me all the time because I didn't count my life as my own. And that's what Declaration says, right? We
Yes.
we're willing to give up our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. And I just looked at it and I just put my blinders on and I thought, okay, God. And I knew, because the other thing is right after the day after after January 6th, well, January 7th, one of my daughters had worked in the DC and she said, Mom, some people I told you probably could get arrested for going in there. And so I did spend the next day just having a little conversation with God. And I said, do I need to repent for going in there? Did I do something wrong? And he said, no. You obeyed me and I'm proud of you. And that's all it took from that January 7th, 2021, when I heard that. It just kept me through everything.
Wow.
Knowing that I was obedient, because that's my first call in life, to obey God.
Wow.
So anyway, back to the trial.
Yeah, so I wanted to go to the judge. So you were assigned a judge that is a religion that's a lot different than Christianity, right? You had a Muslim judge, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, my attorneys, they knew all the judges, and they thought, well, we'll get this judge. He's going to be more kind to you. He's a magistrate. And then after they get there, we find out that he's a Muslim judge. He was practicing. I could kind of. I've done a lot of fasting, and it was, I don't know what day that's called. When I was during my trial, was not only the day of Purim in the Hebrew faith feast. It was around that time, but it was also some Muslim holiday where they fasted, and so he was fasting. The judge was telling us that he was fasting, and I said, "Oh, I know how to do that too." But I kind of wanted to relate to him a little bit. But anyway, so the trial lasted 6 days. I got to be on the witness stand. I was practically the whole last day because they would not let me say my true intention, which has, if you study the Constitution and our rights, that we have a right to stand up there and give our defense and why we did what we did, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the judge and the prosecution, whenever I said I was there, I gave my whole testimony. I said I went there to obey God, and I went there because I wanted to exercise my First Amendment rights. As soon as I said my First Amendment, they would cut me off with the objection.
Wow.
So that's why my witness stand was probably all last day. But anyway, finally at 4:30, the jury was able to go to the room to start deliberating on the trial. And my attorney said, well, if anybody could win this case and get acquitted, it would be you, because you were there to pray. All the video footage showed nothing of violence, nothing that I disobeyed, other than I went in the building. And so they said most of these trials, and they'd done probably 40 to 50 of them, that's all they did. And they said, usually people get a verdict within an hour. My trial deliberation went 26 hours.
Wow. Because
there was somebody in there that did believe what I was saying and wanted to, even in a DC jury pool. So, but finally then on the 4th of April, they called up, they said, we have a verdict. And I thought, okay, I would like to be acquitted because nobody's ever been acquitted, right? Mm-hmm. And I just thought, well, that'd be good. But then I thought about it more, and I realized that if I am acquitted, then, because the trial was such, I couldn't say my First Amendment rights. We had Rick Green, the America's Constitution coach, come there, and they wouldn't even let him say anything about the Constitution. They cut him off just like that. And so it was just a sham. It was just totally unjust. And whoever's the audience and watching this, you probably believe like I do. But what happened then was, okay, I stood up and they were reading the verdict because they said we had a verdict. It was the 4th day of deliberation. And then the first count, they read the 4 counts. If you know how a trial works, they read your counts. And then the jury says, guilty or not guilty. And they ended up convicting me guilty on 4 federal misdemeanors. So then at the end of that, when I got that, I thought, okay. And then the first thing I heard from God was, I'm going to amplify your voice. And that's why I think, because if I would have got acquitted, there were a lot of people following me at that time. We had gone out to a lot of people, and they knew if I got convicted, all those people that were following me would think, well, see, the justice system is fair. And it wasn't. I said, okay, God, I'll be the one that you can throw me in the lion's den. I don't care. I want the people, the government, to know that this is wrong. Our country is in trouble. And if you don't know it, I'll be the one that you can be the example. And so I just told that to God the day before I got my verdict. And then what happened next was he said, I'm going to amplify your voice because I got convicted. And I said, okay, God,
Wow.
I'll obey you. And so right after that, that night, I started being on interviews. Next day, I was interviewed on Sebastian Gorka, Steve Bannon, and a bunch of different shows. I think it was on Newsmax and all that. They wanted to interview me. And actually, President Trump tweeted about me. Elon Musk.
I saw that, yes.
Elon Musk.
Yes.
And I thought, this is happening to me? Okay, God, I just wanted to obey you.
So you're hearing guilty. You know,
Yeah.
And what was your response in that moment personally? But then also, what did you say to the judge?
I didn't say anything to them because what happened is after you're convicted in all these J6 trials, if you have a trial, they say they give you 120 days so they can investigate you, investigate your character and see how they should sentence you, right? Mm-hmm. So they give me a chance to prove myself if I should get a light sentence or a heavy sentence, mm-hmm. right? So, but I didn't. They warned me, and my attorney said, just don't say anything bad about the judge or jury. You know, so I said, I can kind of do that. Well, it doesn't matter if you say one little word, they'll twist it. So anyway, so I was able to be free for 120 days before I got sentenced. So my sentencing was set for August 12th, went back to D.C. I get up there, and I was able to, each defendant gets a chance to tell something about why they should or shouldn't be sentenced or something, mm-hmm. whatever. And the prosecution got up there and said, and this is kind of cool, is they said, we believe that Miss Lavrenz should be put in prison for at least 10 months and not be on it because she's one of the loudest voices for January 6th. And I said, yes, I obeyed God. You just confirmed it. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, got through that. And then my turn to get up there, and I said to the judge, I said, Your Honor, this is a Muslim judge, the same judge that I had before, and I said, I respect your position, Your Honor, but I have to obey a higher judge, and his name is Jesus, you know, God, I don't know if I said Jesus or God. I said, and at the end of the age, every knee will have to bow to him. And then I went on to proceed why I wasn't going to recant what I did, because that's what the whole point of that is. And mm-hmm. my attorneys had said, one of the other defendants, the judge had worn her down so much, and she said, I'm sorry I did it. And I knew I would never say that.
Wow.
And they told me that's what the judge will try to do to me, but yeah. I knew where I stood. And so then, and I didn't know what they were going to sentence me if I had the potential of going to prison for
right.
a year or more. I mean, eventually, and so then when he gave me my sentence, he was so mad. He just said he did not like the fact that I was out there talking. And he reamed me about that for not obeying my attorneys to mm-hmm. keep my mouth shut. But I could. There was nothing sentenced then.
Yeah.
And so then he said, I could incarcerate you, and I probably should, but I'm not going to, because I don't think it'd do you any good. And then he said, but because all these other people that are interviewing you, like you were doing, he was saying you were influencing me. All these interviewers that I were on, they were influencing me. So I need to stay home and be a grandma, rock my grandkids, you know, because I need to rock my grandkids. And then he said, and because they were upset that because, and I'll probably get emotional, I put a Give, Send, Go account up there for people. And I got so much support. It was unbelievable. And they hated it because I just overwhelmed because wow. I knew that there's so many people that love our country with me. And that always makes me emotional in my heart because I know that I didn't do this for me. I did it for we.
We the people, yes.
Exactly. So they said, okay, I'm going to fine you $103,000. It's the largest federal misdemeanor fine in U.S. history, according to the research my attorneys did. And they sentenced me to house arrest for 6 months, and then they said because of the internet that I was all over, they wanted to shut me. It said banned me from the internet for 6 months.
Wow. So, in closing, if you could kind of talk about and share, you went through great trials, and I think for me, when I'm listening to your story, it's very easy to be a good steward of the blessings that God gives us. He gives us so many blessings, and He gives us, so many resources in life. And we are to be a good steward. We are to share those and minister to other people and speak truth and be a light as you were. But He also puts us through trials. And it can be really hard to, get through a trial. It can be really hard to, go through the tough times in life. But even when we're in those tough times, we need to be the best steward of those times. We need to, learn from our failures, learn from the experiences, share it with others. We need to, walk out even with a higher lifted spirit than we went into it. And so, you did that. I say that you were a good steward with the trials that God gave you. Going through that, what did you learn from it? What were your takeaways? Is your faith stronger now than it was going into it? Share, what your biggest takeaways were with our audience.
Well, looking back on some of the things that happened, and I have many years more that I've lived my life than you have, and I can see all along how God used everything, even my mistakes. As long as you keep your eyes focused on Jesus, as that's your goal in life, to put Him number one, that's my biggest message. There's a scripture that I would read Proverbs a lot. 31 days, if I didn't get in another reading plan, I'd read. And one of the scriptures, I don't remember exactly right now what the reference is, but it says, evil men do not understand justice, but those who crave and seek the Lord understand it fully. And that's kind of been my motto, what I've learned from the whole thing. It's so, if you crave God, if you crave and seek being alone, and having that relationship with Him, He will guide you wherever you need to go. Yes, you may have to look away from all the fears and the foes that come against you, but if you develop that friendship with God, those fears will go away. He'll lift them, and He'll put you right in a Kairos moment. And so many things that I believe about God and His ways. It's been my mission in life. And I have a website called restoringgodlyculture.com if you want to.
Yeah, please go check it out, everyone.
Yeah, but anyway, on there I have all my interviews and my mission. But my mission in life has always been, since I became a Christian, to know God and to know what His ways are for me and what His ways are, know His heart. And you can't do that without spending time, and you have to crave God. You put Him number one. And if you do that, then you understand justice. And then you'll follow His ways. You might not do it perfect all the time. You might allow yourself to get comfortable. Then you get back in, and God might say whack you upside the head or whatever it needs to do, but get you back on track. But if you put Him first and you seek His ways and just always be following to be obedient to what He's called you to do, there will be so much joy. I have never had much. It might sound funny, but I've had so much joy in this journey. People have no idea what the joy I have, because I would never have met you, Elijah.
Yeah.
And to know that there's another generation of people that love God in our country, it gives me hope and keeps me living. Because I've always told my children and grandchildren, I'm going to live to be 120. But I have to keep healthy and alive and see people like you, and you inspire me to just keep doing that. I want my story out there. I want people to know God. I want them to stand up for our country, because that foundation that I stood for, that covenant that our pilgrims said, we want this land, and we've gotten so far from those foundations. I want this land, like our pilgrims did, to give glory to God and advance the Christian faith. But how are we going to do that if we don't have courage to go after God and stand up for what's on His heart in the midst of something like this? And as you heard part of my story, God protected me all the way.
That's beautiful. Amen. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We really appreciate you blessing us with our time.
You're going to go far.
Thank you so much. And you inspire all of us too. So thank you.
You guys are all a blessing.